Let me paint you a real person, not a statistic. Imagine you're 24, like Maya in Columbus, Ohio. She works full-time at $22 an hour in a customer support job. On paper, that's about $45,000 a year. It sounds okay, but here's how her Friday paycheck actually disappears. The money lands. $1,600 for rent with a roommate leaves her account 2 days later. Then a $380 car payment plus insurance. 2 credit cards take their minimums. By the time we're done walking through her budget together, almost 70% of her paycheck is gone before she's even bought groceries. We haven't talked about her $35,000 in student loans yet, or the random $120 doctor bill that shows up once in a while. One flat tire, one missed shift, and the backup plan is a credit card with an APR over 25%. And here's the hard truth I want you to hear gently. Maya is not unusual. Most young Americans live like this, one surprise away from sliding deeper into debt. Not because they're lazy, not because they're stupid, but because the system quietly pushes them to the edge. That's why, in this video, we're going to talk about one quiet turning point almost nobody explains clearly. Your first $100,000 invested. So before we go further, let me slow down and talk to you, not the audience. My name's Dax. I make these videos for people exactly like you and Maya. Smart, trying, but tired of feeling like every month is a reset button. If that sounds like you, you're in the right place. Right now in the US, most young adults don't have much more than a few $100s saved. A lot have less than that. When I talk to people your age, the pattern is almost always the same. Rent, car note, cards, loans. Then hope nothing bad happens before the next paycheck. This channel exists for one reason: to quietly, steadily pull you out of that. No hype, no rise and grind, just clear explanations and realistic math. So if you want a calm place to learn this stuff, hit subscribe so you don't lose it later. Then, stay with me, because in the next part, we're going to unpack what $100,000 invested actually does for a life like yours. When I sit down with someone like you, the details change, but the story feels weirdly familiar. The paycheck lands, auto drafts hit. By the time rent, the car note, phone, and 2 card minimums clear, there's this small number left that's supposed to cover an entire life. Groceries on the debit card, the in-between stuff, takeout after a brutal shift, gas when prices jump, quietly slips onto the credit card because there's nowhere else for it to go. If that's you, you're not broken. You're normal in today's America. Recent surveys show most workers would struggle if a single paycheck was delayed. One national poll found about 3 out of 4 Americans would be in real trouble if their pay didn't show up on time. From my chair as Dax, looking at real budgets with people your age, the pattern is the same. Your effort is not the problem. The problem is that your entire setup has almost zero shock absorber. Prices creeping up are something I hear about in almost every call. You open your lease renewal and rent is up $80. Your grocery run somehow costs $15 more than last month, even though the cart looks the same. Car insurance emails you a small adjustment. None of these feel like a crisis alone, but together, they squeeze every inch of breathing room you thought you had. When I look at the data, and not just stories, it lines up. Overall inflation is cooled to around the 2 to 3% range again, but food at home just jumped the most since 2022. Groceries are still drifting higher even after the big spike years. From where you sit, it doesn't matter that economists say inflation is under control. Your baseline has already been reset upward. As Dax, my job is to name what you're feeling. Your income didn't stretch to the new price level, so your budget isn't a plan anymore. It's a tightrope. Let's zoom into one of those bad weeks I see all the time. You get sick, miss shifts, and suddenly your paycheck is $400 short. Rent is still due. The car note doesn't care. In our call, we walk through options, and they all feel bad. So, like most people, you lean on a credit card. Just this once. On paper, it's a bridge. In reality, it's a trap built into the system. Average credit card interest now hovers around roughly 20 to 24% a year. When the Federal Reserve pushed short-term rates up to fight inflation, lenders used that as a floor and then stacked their profit margin on top. From my side of the table, here's what I watch happen. You send the minimum every month, and a big chunk of that payment never touches the balance. It just pays the toll for borrowing in the first place. One bad week silently taxes the next 30 paychecks. You might be thinking, but Dax, my pay did go up. Why does it still feel worse? I hear that line so often it's almost a script. Here's the quiet math behind that feeling. When inflation jumps fast, like it did in 2021, 2022, prices don't politely fall back down later. They step up and stay there. The official inflation rate can drift back toward 2 to 3%, but that just means prices are rising more slowly from a higher base, not reversing. Meanwhile, higher interest rates linger in your life through card APRs, car loans, and sometimes even your landlord's mortgage. So you're squeezed from both sides. The cost of living climbed a staircase, and the cost of carrying debt climbed with it. When I run the numbers with people, the story is almost always the same. Their raise mostly went to catching up, not moving ahead. Emotionally, that feels like running on a treadmill that keeps speeding up half a notch at a time. When I bring up other countries, it's not to scare you. It's to show that this feeling of, my money no longer fits my life, is a pattern, not a personal flaw. Take places like Argentina or Turkey. When inflation or their currency spirals, headlines talk about exchange rates, bond markets, CDS spreads. Basically, the cost of insuring against government default, and whether there's enough liquidity in the banking system to keep things functioning. Underneath those big words, ordinary people are just watching prices change faster than their paychecks. In Venezuela, in parts of Greece after their crisis, the script was similar. Savings in cash melted. Imported goods exploded in price, and long-term plans became impossible. The 1997 Asian crisis, when countries had to call in the IMF, was another version. Debts promised in strong foreign currencies suddenly became unbearable when exchange rates moved. Different flags, same human story. The future stopped adding up. Here's why I bother connecting your budget to those big crises. The logic is the same, just at a different scale. In 1997, a lot of Asian governments and companies had borrowed in dollars. When their own currencies fell, those debts ballooned in local terms. What looked manageable on a spreadsheet suddenly became crushing when the exchange rate moved. At a household level, debt does that in time instead of currency. When you take on big student loans, a long car loan, or stack credit cards, you're making promises with your future paychecks. As long as your income grows smoothly and interest rates behave, it feels fine. But if your pay stalls or rates rise, that fixed payment starts eating a larger share of your life. In one-on-one sessions, I see this moment clearly. People say, it used to be tight but doable. Then one thing changed, and now it never adds up. That's what a personal version of a crisis looks like. No headlines, just constant, quiet stress. Let's come back home to you in the US. Housing is where a lot of the pressure shows up when I review budgets. After years of high inflation and high rates, mortgages became more expensive, and rents followed in many areas, even as wages struggled to keep pace. That combo keeps a lot of people in long-term renting, often with roommates, just to stay close to work. Then we look at savings. Federal Reserve data suggests the median American has only a modest few $1,000s in the bank, and people under 35 average around $20,000 across checking and savings, with big gaps by income. For retirement, only about half of under 35s have any account at all, and among those who do, the median balance is under $20,000. When I sit across from someone your age, that's usually what I see. High fixed costs, thin cushions, and a future that feels too fragile to experiment with. This is where that $100,000 invested comes in. On this channel, I don't treat it like a flex number. I treat it like a line where the math finally starts working for you instead of against you. I'm not talking about $100,000 sitting in a checking account, slowly getting eaten by rising prices. I mean $100,000 spread across real assets, like broad index funds in a 401k or IRA. The kinds of things that, over long stretches, tend to grow faster than day-to-day inflation. If that pile grows by 5% in a year, that's $5,000. For many people I talk to, That's 2, 3, sometimes 4 months of core expenses created by past work. When someone I coach gets close to that line, something shifts. Emergencies become annoying, not catastrophic. A lost job means I have runway, not I'm ruined. Hitting $100,000 invested doesn't make you rich, but for a lot of paycheck-to-paycheck lives, it's the first real exit ramp. When I talk about $100,000 invested, I'm not trying to dangle some magic number in front of you. I think of it as a line where your money finally starts acting like a second worker in your life. Up to that point, almost everything comes from your labor, hours, shifts, clock-ins. After that, more and more comes from capital, the pile you've already built quietly working in the background. As DAX, when I sit with someone stuck in paycheck mode, I don't start with, how fast can we get you to 100K? I start with, what would it feel like to have even 3 months of bills covered by money you already earned? That feeling of not panicking when the car makes a weird noise is what 100K begins to protect. It's not a finish line. It's the point where this stop-start survival cycle finally has a realistic way to break. Let's make this less abstract. In sessions, I'll sometimes walk someone through rough paths to 100K just so they can see it's big, but not impossible. For example, if someone manages to invest around $400 a month starting in their early 20s, and they earn normal market returns over time, they might hit that number somewhere in their early to mid-30s. If they can do $700 to $800, it can come faster. Those are just ballpark illustrations, not promises. Real life is messier. Job changes, layoffs, medical bills, family emergencies. That's why I never frame 100K as a sprint. For most people, it's built in phases. A chaotic start, a more stable middle, then a compounding phase where growth finally outruns new contributions. The point isn't get there fast. The point is, start moving in that direction on purpose, even if it's $50 at a time. Here's the tension you're probably feeling. Dax, I can barely breathe right now. Where is this investment money supposed to come from? That's a fair question. When I open a real budget with someone, the big three usually dominate: housing, transportation, and debt payments. Rent, car, and cards often eat 60 to 70% of take-home pay before food even enters the picture. So we don't start with guilt. We start with structure. First, we map the non-negotiables: rent, basic food, utilities, minimum debt payments. Then we look at everything else through one lens. Does this purchase move me closer to, or further from, getting even a tiny slice of my paycheck out of the month-to-month game? Sometimes the first move isn't investing at all. It's negotiating a bill, downsizing a car, or finding $50 of genuine waste that doesn't actually improve your life. The goal is to carve out a small, protected amount that becomes your future, not tomorrow's emergency. Now let's zoom back out to the system level for a minute, because understanding it can actually lower your anxiety. When the economy wobbles hard, you'll hear a lot about the Federal Reserve. Think of the Fed as the team managing the speed and pressure of money in the system. When things crash or freeze, like in 2008 or in the early days of the pandemic, they usually cut interest rates to make borrowing cheaper and push more money through the pipes. They might also buy financial assets from banks to inject liquidity, basically making sure money keeps moving so businesses can pay workers and loans don't all blow up at once. Governments step in too with things like stimulus checks, expanded unemployment, or temporary pauses on certain debts. None of this is about your individual budget. It's about keeping the overall machine from stalling. But it shapes the environment your money lives in. From your seat, government and Fed moves usually show up as vibes before they show up as headlines. Suddenly, everyone is talking about layoffs. Job postings slow down. Rent growth cools, but so do pay raises. Credit card offers change. Interest on savings nudges up or down. In 2020, for example, stimulus checks and boosted unemployment helped a lot of households stay afloat. Some even saved or paid down debt for the first time in years. Then, as support faded and inflation rose, many slipped right back into paycheck-to-paycheck mode. That's the hard truth. System-level help is real, but it's temporary and unpredictable. As DAX, I don't build any plan that depends on Congress doing the right thing at the perfect time. I assume the system will sometimes help you, sometimes hurt you, and often ignore you. Your job is to build enough personal stability that these waves don't knock you over every time. There are three big dials I want you to watch over your lifetime: inflation, interest rates, and employment. You don't need to be an economist. You just need a story for each. Inflation tells you how fast prices are drifting away from your past self. If it's high, cash loses power quickly, and raises matter more. Interest rates tell you the price of using other people's money and the reward for saving your own. High rates punish debt and reward simple saving. Low rates do the opposite. Employment, how easy it is to get and keep a job, affects how risky it feels to make changes in your life. When these three move together, they create seasons. Some seasons favor paying debt aggressively. Others favor building cash. Others are great for locking in a mortgage or leaning into investing. You won't time them perfectly, but if you understand the basics, you'll stop feeling blindsided every time the news changes. So what do we do with all of this in a practical way? When I work with someone overwhelmed, I break their money into three simple buckets: survival, stability, and growth. Survival is today: food, shelter, lights on, minimum payments. This is non-negotiable. We protect it first. Stability is your shock absorber, a small emergency fund, maybe 1 month of expenses in a boring savings account, slowly aiming for 3. Growth is everything that goes into assets that can outpace inflation over time: 401ks, IRAs, index funds. Here's the part most people get wrong. They try to jump straight from survival to growth and skip stability. That works until the first surprise hits. Then they raid their investments or swipe the card again. I'd rather see someone invest a little slower but keep it invested than rush into investing and be forced to undo it at every bump. In the US, you have a few specific tools that are boring but powerful. If your job offers a 401k with a match, that match is basically a built-in return on your money from day one. I often tell people, if you can afford it at all, getting at least the full match is like not leaving free money on the table. Then there are IRAs, especially Roth IRAs, which let your investments grow and come out tax-free later if you follow the rules. For most beginners I talk to, the investing strategy that actually sticks is painfully simple: regular contributions into low-cost index funds that track the overall market. No stock picking, no constant trading, no chasing headlines. Just choosing a percentage, automating it, and letting time do the heavy lifting. It's not exciting. That's the point. When your life already feels chaotic, your money plan should feel almost boring. Debt is where the emotional weight usually sits. People apologize to me for their balances like they've committed a crime. You don't owe me an apology, but you do owe your future self a clear plan. In general, high-interest credit card debt is the loudest fire. When your APR is in the 20% range, that debt is growing faster than almost any safe investment. So once your basic survival and a tiny emergency buffer are in place, I usually like to see people focus heavily there. Some prefer the avalanche method, paying off the highest interest first. Others need the snowball, knocking out the smallest balance for a quick win. The math slightly favors avalanche. The psychology often favors snowball. My view is DAX. The best method is the one you'll actually stick with through boring months, not just inspired ones. Then there's lifestyle, which is where a lot of finance advice turns into shaming. I refuse to do that. You're allowed to have joy and comfort, but we have to be honest about trade-offs. When I go line by line through a bank statement with someone, I'm not hunting for lattes. I'm looking at the big levers: housing, car, and recurring commitments. Moving to a slightly cheaper place or taking on one more roommate can free up more monthly cash than cutting every treat. Driving a car that's good enough instead of impressive can mean hundreds of dollars back in your pocket. Canceling 3 forgotten subscriptions might beat stressing over every meal. The question I keep asking in those conversations is simple. If we keep your life feeling like you, what's the least painful version of this budget that still creates room for future you? If you're living paycheck to paycheck right now, I don't expect you to overhaul everything tomorrow. When I build a 90-day plan with someone, we usually focus on 3 moves. First, we track everything for 1 month without judgment. The goal isn't perfection, It's clarity. Second, we build a tiny buffer, maybe $300 to $500, in a separate savings account and agree not to touch it except for real emergencies. Even that small amount can change how you sleep. Third, we automate one small contribution toward your future, $25, $50, $100 a month into a retirement account or simple index fund. Is that enough to race to $100,000? No, but it turns your relationship with money from reaction to intention. From that foundation, bigger changes become less terrifying because you've already proved you can move the needle.
Over time, I've noticed something interesting. When people finally get close to that $100,000 invested mark, the biggest change isn't in their net worth, it's in their nervous system. They still have problems, they still get unexpected bills, but the background noise of constant financial panic quiets down. That pile of money becomes more than numbers. It's proof that not every dollar you earn has to disappear into the present. It's evidence that your life is allowed to have a future. When markets dip, instead of pure fear, there's a different thought. I'm still in the game. I have time. I don't want you chasing $100,000 as a status symbol. I want you aiming at it as a point where your past self finally starts sending help every single year without you asking. That's what changes the feeling of living in your own skin.
So where does that leave you? Sitting here with your own mix of rent, debt, and worries. I'm not going to tell you the system is fair. Parts of it are absolutely tilted. Housing, healthcare, education, and wages haven't all moved in sync, and you're the one living inside that mismatch. But I also don't want you to walk away thinking your only options are despair or blind optimism. There's a third path. Clear-eyed control over what you can move. Understanding how inflation, interest, and crises work so they surprise you less. Building a survival base, then a stability cushion, then a slow-growing pile of assets that eventually crosses that $100,000 line. As Dax, my job isn't to promise you wealth. It's to give you a map in a landscape that often feels rigged. You won't fix everything in a year, but if you keep nudging the math a little more in your favor, month after month, the version of you who hits $100,000 invested will look back and be grateful you started.